When God separates you from a man, it often feels like your world has collapsed overnight. You question yourself, you question him, and sometimes you even question God. Because from where you stand, the pain doesn't look purposeful. It looks personal. But divine separation is never about rejection. It's about redirection. What feels like abandonment is actually a sacred act of guidance. There are seasons in life when God must intervene, not because you've done something wrong, but because you've reached a place where staying connected to the wrong energy would silently sabotage your destiny. You see, we tend to interpret loss through the lens of emotion, but God operates through the lens of elevation. You might be praying for peace while holding on to the very person disturbing it. You might be asking for clarity while refusing to let go of what clouds your vision. So sometimes, God doesn't answer your prayers by adding something new. He answers them by subtracting what no longer serves your growth. It's not cruelty, it's divine surgery. He cuts away what your heart refuses to release, not to harm you, but to heal you from a bond that was delaying your evolution. Many people think love is proof of divine alignment, but not all love is meant to last. Some love enters your life as a lesson, not a lifetime. God allows certain connections to form so that they can reveal what needs healing within you. Your insecurities, your boundaries, your sense of self-worth. And once those lessons are learned, that connection begins to dissolve. If you hold on too tightly, you begin to suffer because you're trying to preserve what heaven has already dismissed. It's not that the man was necessarily bad. It's that his purpose in your story has been fulfilled. Staying beyond that moment turns purpose into pain. There's a divine rhythm to relationships, a timing we often ignore because our emotions want what our spirit has outgrown. We try to negotiate with God saying, just one more chance, one more conversation, one more sign. But the truth is, when something is divinely closed, no amount of pleading can reopen it. That's not punishment, that's protection. God's silence after separation is often his way of saying, you've already learned what you needed from this chapter. It's time to turn the page. This is where faith becomes more than a word. It becomes an act of surrender. It's easy to trust God when things are being added to your life, but it's real faith when you trust him as he takes something away. Because in that moment, you have to believe that the removal is redirection, that the absence of this person is actually the presence of a greater plan. God doesn't just take people away. He makes room for your next level of peace, purpose, and alignment. From a psychological perspective, human beings are wired to seek attachment. It's a survival instinct. We crave connection, comfort, and belonging. So when separation happens, the mind interprets it as danger or failure. But spiritual maturity is learning that separation is not always loss. It's transition. You are being transitioned from dependence on someone else's validation to dependence on your own divine identity. That's not something your ego welcomes, but your spirit understands it completely. Think about it. Every great transformation in your life was preceded by discomfort. Growth never feels graceful at first. It feels like confusion, like loneliness, like silence. But what's really happening is that your soul is being recalibrated. God removes what disturbs your inner harmony so that he can replace it with something that aligns with your higher calling. That's why divine separation is so misunderstood, because it's disguised as disappointment. Yet if you trace every major blessing in your life, you'll notice it began with something or someone you had to lose. The truth is, God cannot bless who you pretend to be, and He cannot elevate you while you're anchored to what holds you down. There are people whose presence might feel familiar, but whose energy keeps you spiritually stagnant. You may share memories, but you no longer share purpose. And when purpose shifts, connections that were once powerful begin to fade. That fading isn't betrayal, it's transition. God is simply aligning your external world with your internal growth. You can't walk into your next season carrying yesterday's version of love. Sometimes the man God separates you from is the very person you thought you'd spend your life with. You made plans, built dreams, and envisioned a shared future. But God saw what you couldn't. He saw that your path required freedom, not attachment. He saw the silent compromises that were diminishing your spirit. He saw the distractions that kept you from hearing His voice clearly. And so He stepped in, not because you weren't worthy of love, but because you were worthy of something deeper, divine wholeness. That's why divine separation demands trust more than understanding. You may not see the reason now, but if you stay faithful to your healing, one day you'll look back and realize that what left your life was never meant to complete you. It was meant to awaken you. God doesn't take away what's meant for you. He removes what was blocking it. So if you find yourself in a season of loss, don't rush to replace what's gone. Don't fill the silence with noise. Let the absence speak. Let the pain purify your heart. Let the emptiness become a sacred space where God can build something new in you. Because when you stop chasing what He's taken, you create space for what He's preparing. Maybe this separation isn't the end of love. It's the beginning of alignment. Maybe it's not rejection. It's refinement. Maybe it's not about losing someone, but about finding yourself again in God's timing. And perhaps the most powerful truth of all is this: when God separates you from a man, it's because He's preparing you for a version of love that won't require you to abandon yourself to keep it. When God removes a person from your life, especially someone you deeply cared for, it can feel unfair. You might wonder, why would God take away something that made me feel alive? But what we often fail to see is that not everything that feels good is good for our growth. Sometimes the connection that makes your heart race is the very one that keeps your spirit stagnant. When God separates you from a man, it is often because that relationship has started to block your evolution. It may look beautiful on the surface, shared laughter, memories, promises, but beneath that beauty, something sacred within you is being stifled. God is more concerned with your transformation than your temporary satisfaction. He sees where you are meant to go, what you are meant to become, and how certain attachments can quietly interfere with that process. Many relationships are not destroyed by conflict. They simply expire because one person begins to outgrow the emotional patterns that once sustained the bond. You can love someone deeply and still be aware that staying attached would mean shrinking into a smaller version of yourself. And when your spirit reaches that awareness, but your heart refuses to act, God will. From a psychological lens, this kind of divine removal is often misunderstood because our attachment system interprets separation as danger. We are biologically wired to cling to what feels familiar, even if it's unhealthy. The mind prefers the comfort of predictability over the uncertainty of growth. That's why people stay in relationships that slowly suffocate them, because familiarity feels safer than freedom. But God doesn't operate according to your comfort zone. His purpose is not to keep you comfortable, but to keep you aligned. Growth always demands space. If someone is blocking your peace, consuming your energy, or diminishing your confidence, that relationship becomes a spiritual barrier. God cannot expand you while you're tied to what limits you. It's not that the person is evil. It's that their presence no longer supports your next level. Some people are lessons wrapped in affection. They come into your life to mirror your insecurities, to expose the places within you that still need healing. Once that reflection has served its purpose, their role in your story ends. When you refuse to release them, what was once a divine encounter becomes a spiritual burden. The hardest truth to accept is that love alone is not enough to sustain a relationship that hinders growth. You can love someone sincerely and still recognize that their energy pulls you backward. God sees when your spirit starts to dim in someone else's shadow. He sees the moments you stop praying as much because the relationship consumes your focus. He sees how your purpose takes a back seat while your emotions take the wheel. And when that imbalance grows too heavy, He intervenes, not to punish you, but to preserve you. Spiritually speaking, divine separation is an act of mercy. It protects your calling from compromise. It protects your identity from distortion. There are times when staying connected to the wrong person can silence the voice of God within you, because you begin to rely more on human validation than divine direction. That's why He will create friction, confusion, and even conflict, because those are often the only languages the heart understands when it refuses to let go. If you pay attention, divine separation rarely happens suddenly. God gives signs, subtle ones at first. You feel emotionally drained after conversations that used to energize you. You sense that you're no longer seen for who you truly are, but for the version that benefits them. You notice yourself apologizing for your growth, trying to make your light smaller so it doesn't intimidate them. And deep down, you know something sacred is shifting, but you resist it because your heart remembers the good moments. You tell yourself it's just a phase, that you can fix it. Yet every time you try to fix what God is dissolving, you end up feeling emptier. That emptiness is not rejection. It's divine guidance urging you to stop patching what's meant to end. Growth and stagnation cannot coexist. One must surrender to the other. When God separates you, He is choosing your expansion over your comfort. He is choosing your destiny over your attachment. He is saying, you've learned what you needed from this person. Now you must step into the version of yourself that can walk without them. And though your emotions may rebel, your spirit knows it's time. Because somewhere within you, peace has begun to whisper louder than fear. This process also teaches you to distinguish between soul connection and soul assignment. A soul connection can feel magnetic, intense, and consuming. But that doesn't always mean it's meant to last. A soul assignment, on the other hand, is purposeful. It may not feel as thrilling, but it expands you, it aligns you, it draws you closer to your divine essence. God removes the connections that drain your light so He can prepare you for the ones that reflect it. If you're in the midst of that divine separation, remember that loneliness is not proof of abandonment. It's the soil where your independence and clarity grow. In solitude, you rediscover the voice of God that was buried under compromise. You realize that peace is not something another person gives you. It's something you create when you honor what God has revealed. The silence after separation is sacred ground. That's where transformation begins. And yes, you'll miss them. You'll replay memories, reread old messages, and wonder if maybe you made a mistake. But in those moments, ask yourself, am I missing them? Or am I missing the comfort of who I was when they were around? Because often what we grieve is not the person. It's the version of ourselves that felt loved, even if that love was limiting. God doesn't want you to go backward. He wants you to evolve beyond the need for love that costs you your peace. One day, you'll thank Him for the doors that didn't reopen. You'll thank Him for the unanswered prayers, the sudden distance, the endings that didn't make sense, because you'll see that every removal was making space for restoration. The peace you'll find in your future will make you grateful for what didn't work out in your past. One of the hardest truths to accept in life is that timing governs everything. You can meet the right person at the wrong time, and it will still fall apart. You can love sincerely and still not be ready for the kind of responsibility that real love requires. And sometimes, when God separates you from a man, it's not because he's wrong for you or because you're unworthy. It's because the timing is not yet divine. God's sense of timing operates on purpose, not pressure. He doesn't move according to your emotions. He moves according to your preparation. What feels like a delay to you is often divine design unfolding with precision. We live in a world that romanticizes urgency. We're taught that if it feels right, it must be right now. But God's process is slower, deeper, and infinitely wiser. He knows that love built prematurely can't withstand the weight of destiny. A relationship formed before both people are healed will end up bleeding into each other's wounds. So sometimes the separation you're grieving isn't rejection. It's preparation. You're being refined for the love you prayed for, even if that refinement means solitude, silence, and stretching. Think of it like this: when you plant a seed, you don't dig it up every few days to check its progress. You trust that beneath the soil, even when nothing seems to be happening, transformation is taking place. God works the same way. He plants you in seasons of waiting because that's where your roots grow strong enough to sustain the blessings that are coming. Separation is part of that soil. It may feel dark and isolating, but it's where strength, wisdom, and discernment are developed. The truth is, divine timing is rarely convenient. It often arrives when your emotions are impatient and your logic can't understand. You may find yourself saying, if it wasn't meant to be now, why did God allow me to meet this person at all? The answer is simple. Not every encounter is meant to lead to permanence. Some people enter your life as preparation, not partnership. They awaken desires, they mirror your growth, and then they leave because their role was to help you recognize what you still need to heal or strengthen before the next chapter begins. Psychologically, we tend to equate timing with worth. When something ends too soon, we assume it's because we weren't enough. But divine timing isn't about worthiness, it's about readiness. You can be worthy of love and still unprepared to sustain it. Readiness requires maturity, and maturity comes through experience, loss, and self-awareness. God allows separation to cultivate these qualities within you. He teaches you to stand on your own, to discern genuine love from emotional dependency, and to find peace without needing constant validation. Because when you reach that state, you attract relationships rooted in purpose, not just passion. There's a reason God doesn't always answer your prayers in the moment you ask. If He gave you what you wanted before you understood its value, you'd mishandle it. Divine timing protects you from premature possession. Many people sabotage blessings because they arrive too early, before the heart has been disciplined and the mind renewed. So, when God separates you from someone, it's not always a permanent no. Sometimes it's a sacred not yet. You both may have lessons to learn, perspectives to shift, or emotional wounds to heal before you can meet again in alignment rather than in confusion. Spiritually speaking, divine timing is an act of mercy. God sees the paths you cannot. He knows what delays are necessary for your development and what pace your soul can handle. You may want a relationship to continue, but if it would derail your purpose or distract you from the healing you need, He'll withhold it. That's not to punish you. It's to protect your destiny. A love that costs you your peace is never divine, and a delay that deepens your purpose is never a loss. Often, the space between separation and fulfillment is where faith matures. This is where you learn to trust unseen processes. You begin to understand that God's silence isn't neglect, it's strategy. He's aligning circumstances, refining character, and preparing both hearts so that when love reappears, it will be whole, not broken. But this waiting period also tests you. It asks, will you trust God's pace, even when it conflicts with your plans? Because true faith isn't tested in abundance, it's tested in absence. Many people try to force God's timing, thinking they can rebuild what He's dismantled. They chase, they plead, hoping to restore what feels familiar. But what's meant for you will never require begging. What God has ordained will return in its proper season, renewed and refined, or it will be replaced with something greater. Either way, divine timing ensures that nothing genuine will ever be lost. The only thing that will fall away is what was never built to last. There's a psychological liberation that comes with surrendering to divine timing. It frees you from anxiety about what could have been and allows you to focus on who you're becoming. You begin to see time not as an enemy, but as an ally. Every day of delay becomes a day of preparation. Every heartbreak becomes a teacher. Every unanswered prayer becomes evidence of God's protection. That shift in perspective turns pain into purpose, confusion into clarity. You stop asking, why did this happen? And start asking, what is this preparing me for? And here's the profound beauty of it. Once divine timing unfolds, it makes sense of every tear you shed. The love that once hurt to lose no longer feels like a loss. It feels like a lesson that shaped you into someone capable of loving more wisely. You'll look back and realize that if things had worked out earlier, you would have settled for less than what you're now ready to receive. God's timing is not just about aligning events. It's about aligning hearts, minds, and spirits with the maturity to handle what's coming. So if you're in a season of waiting, don't resent it. Let it refine you. Let it teach you patience, self-control, and faith. Let it strip away the desperation that once made you cling to what wasn't right. Because when the timing is divine, you won't have to chase anything. What's meant for you will recognize you. It will flow naturally. It will align with peace, not chaos, with growth, not limitation. And when that moment arrives, you'll understand why God separated you in the first place. You'll see that His delay wasn't denial, it was direction. He was never withholding love from you. He was perfecting it for you. After separation, there comes a kind of silence that feels heavy, almost unbearable at times. The noise of daily conversation fades. The presence you grew accustomed to disappears. And suddenly, the world feels too quiet. It's in that stillness that most people panic. They rush to fill the void by reaching out, by distracting themselves, by trying to recreate what once was. But what we often fail to understand is that this silence is not a punishment, it's an invitation. When God separates you from someone, especially someone you deeply loved, the silence that follows isn't empty, it's sacred. It's the space where He begins to speak the loudest. We live in a culture that fears silence. We fill our days with noise, our minds with distractions, our hearts with constant stimulation. Yet silence is where truth hides. Silence is where understanding grows roots.